the day Mr. Nixon resigned. I think a disgrace to America that happened, and especially a disgrace that happened to the man I think was the greatest president in the history of the United States, Richard Milhous Nixon, savior of the children of Israel, the best friend the Jewish people have ever had. We are so grateful. We as Jews and we as Americans are on our hands and knees to Mr. Nixon and to his whole family, especially to my very favorite Julie Nixon Eisenhower and her wonderful husband, David. Amazing, astonishing people. Okay, well, let's go back a little bit. I am from Washington, D.C. I was born there and I grew up there, and lots. And I lived in a suburb called Silver Spring, Maryland, and it was a nice suburb, and it was a suburb that existed. It wasn't anything like as elegant and fancy as some of the other suburbs that didn't allow Jews to live there, but this suburb did, and it was a perfectly pleasant place to live. Lots and lots of very left-wing people lived in that area, and lots of them. And why they bothered staying in America, I don't know. I wish they'd go away, but they didn't. And wow, every day I woke up in America. I was so grateful to be in America. I still am. Every day I wake up. Wifey and I, thank you. Wifey and I wake up every day, hands and knees, gratitude to be in America. All right, I'll go back a little. There's no adequate thanks that can be given possibly to the people of the United States of America for letting us in, take care of us. My father served bravely in the Navy. My wife is a saint, a living, breathing goddess. Her father served he was a West Point grad, served in the U.S. Army, fought against the Nazis and against the communists, and he was and is, well, he's passed away now, an incredibly great man. Okay, go on a little farther, then a little back. This country has been so good to us Jews, it's unbelievable. I don't want to hear any complaints ever about America. My sister, Democrat, she said to me a few years ago, she said, I don't know if I'll stay here, live in America. I don't know if I want to be in this racist country anymore. I can't even say to you the words that went through my mind, but she is my sister, so what the heck. Anyway, let's look at what America was and is under Nixon. Mr. Nixon was always being called an anti-Semite. He was always being called a racist. All lies. Mr. Nixon was the best friend the Jewish people have ever had since there has been a Jewish people. Mr. Nixon was the best friend Israel has ever had, ever. This was a guy who was endlessly smeared, lied about, and yet kept coming back to do good deeds and great deeds for the children of Israel. What can we say about a man like that except he is sent from heaven to be God's gift to us children of Israel? Wow, what an amazing man Mr. Nixon was and is. I worship him. I've been good friends with Julie for a long time, ever since she had respectfully and kindly asked me if I would walk her dogs. And I was happy to do it. I would have been happy to do it day and night. Mr. Nixon said many a time there's as much dignity in cleaning out a bedpan as there is in being president if you do it with your whole heart. He was totally right, completely right about everything he said. Okay, Mr. Nixon was hated from a very early age of his political career because of some lies and slanders about his something he did to a woman named Helen Gahagan Douglas, who was a Democrat politician here in Southern California. He didn't do anything bad there. It was just all made up. She was a leftist. She wasn't. I don't think she was a spy. She was a leftist. He didn't do anything bad to her. She really didn't do much bad to him. But somehow the word got out that he was a terrible, awful, terrible guy. Not true ever, not even remotely. Nevertheless, the word got around. somehow the phrase tricky Dick got attached to him. Why? I have no idea. I must say he's the least tricky person I ever saw in my life. I mean, the most tricky person would be Carl Bernstein. Anyway, and I know this because Carl was my next door neighbor in Silver Spring. Anyway, and he was tricky. Anyway, the okay, so Mr. Nixon ran for various important offices. Senator at a very young age, ran for vice president under one of America's great super war heroes, Dwight Eisenhower, a genuinely great man. Every fiber of his being was great. You get an idea of how great he was by the fact that after he won in a big way, had a lot to do with winning World War II against the Nazis. He insisted that all of the people that possibly could be brought over there were made to view the Nazi death camps, so that because he knew that the time would come when people would say, "Oh, the Jews made it all up. It's all a slander. The Nazis weren't that bad." We see it's happening right now. No one would have believed it possible. It's happening right now. There are videos of the Nazis killing the Jews, videos of the Jews being lined up, shot, buried alive by the Nazis. Somehow, this has all been forgotten. Now it's the Jews who are the aggressors. It's the Jews who are the killers. What craziness, what insane craziness. And yet it's happening right before our eyes. Would anyone have thought that possible? And yet, as I say, it's happening right now before our very eyes. Breathtakingly horrible, breathtakingly sickening, a breathtaking lie on so many different levels. It's comes close to being unbelievable, but unfortunately, it's all too believable. This is the way if I may say this is the way the Bolshevik media in America plays the game. And it's an evil, evil, evil game. It's a sickening, lying game, but it happens. Okay, so Mr. Nixon serves 2 terms as vice president under a really, really wonderful man, Dwight Eisenhower, a man who really loved the truth, a hero, a man who really figured out how things worked. And then Mr. Nixon was, I think, let's just call a spade. They stole the election from him in 1960. Fraudulent counting of the election returns in Texas and Illinois. We know what that's like. We've seen it much more recently than 1960. Okay, so Mr. Nixon goes off into the political wilderness, but he never gives up. Pat Buchanan, a long time friend, wrote an incredibly great book about it called The Greatest Comeback, and Mr. Nixon worked methodically, brilliantly, tirelessly to come back and be the candidate in '68 and won by the biggest electoral majority ever. And next thing we knew, he was president, and he did a great, super job. When he came to office, it was a nightmare. We had rioting in the streets, every kind of dishonesty in the streets, every kind of chicanery in the streets, every kind of chicanery in politics. Mr. Nixon just went plugging ahead and won a great, great victory for the democracy itself. Nobody thought it could be done, but Mr. Nixon could do it. And he didn't do it by any kind of magic. He did it just by hard work and belief in America and belief in the Constitution. We have an awful lot of people in the Congress of the United States who don't think the Constitution is the real thing. It's the real thing. It's what saves us from being a Bolshevist dictatorship. And there are plenty of people in this country who would like to see it become a Bolshevist dictatorship. Onward and upward. Okay, so Mr. Nixon is president. Onward and upward. Onward and upward. The Arabs invade Israel, and the chicanery there too was incredible, mind-boggling, hard to believe. And meanwhile, the Israelis are being called racist, are being called horrible names. They've done terrible things. They've been terribly beaten down the Arabs and have abused them and upset them every kind of way. Meanwhile, the Israelis are the only country in the Middle East that's a democracy. They're the only country that guarantees decent medical care to its people. And yet the Jews aren't accused of being murderers, psychopaths, horrible, cruel people, not true. The only place in America that is a caring democracy is Eretz Israel. Nobody ever is going to get sick of smearing the Israeli people. And yet, the Israeli people do incredibly great things for their neighbors and fellow servants of God. The invasion of Israel takes place by the Russians, basically, with the help of all kinds of other wicked people. And it's a bad, bad, bad deal for the Israelis. Mrs. Meir, I'm sure she's a fine woman. I'm sure she's a great woman. Judah, my dear friends, could you bring my sodas, please, and my paregoric? And their Israelis are so wonderful that even when their enemies are wounded in the wars against Israel, the Arabs, wait, sir. I think you're going to have to sit there if you don't mind. The Arabs go to Israel to get their soldiers treated for wounds and injuries. The Israelis are the only ones who can be trusted to do it right. But that doesn't matter in the world media. The Israelis are still the bullies and the thugs. Obvious nonsense, and yet, sir. This is my nurse and my incredibly dear friend. I'm nowhere near limber enough to reach over there and get that. Thank you. If you just put it right there. He gives me a lot more credit than I am due. He's a wonderful guy. Anyway, I think the consul was kind enough to refer to the Yom Kippur War, but I think I could summarize it perhaps a tiny bit differently, certainly no better than you did. Mrs. Meir, I'm sure she's a fine woman, a saintly woman, but she neglected the defense of Eretz Israel terribly, just terribly, and the Russians were about to overrun Eretz Israel. It was a really, really terribly serious problem. No joke. The Russians have I think it was called the SA-7, a wonderful, wonderful anti-aircraft missile, able to down the Israeli Air Force planes and allow the Israeli Air Force to be overwhelmed by the Soviet, I guess at that time, Soviet/Russian-made anti-aircraft rocketry. Israel had nothing to do. They could not beat those missiles. The only country in the world that could defeat those missiles was America, our wonderful, glorious America. And Mr. Nixon called up Mel Laird and some other people in the White House, the Department of Defense, and said, get those rocketry devices, get those SA-7s, SA-6s, whatever they were called, and get them over to Israel right away. Well, there's a lot of whining and moaning, bitching and crying from the Defense Department. No, we can't get it. Nixon said, I want them over there to Israel right now. I don't want to hear any argument about it. I'm not going to hang up the phone until I hear the rockets revving up, the airplanes revving up to get over to Israel. Next thing we knew, the planes were landing in Israel, and the whole game was changed dramatically. Life and death struggle became life and death for the invaders, not life or death for the killers. And it was the life of Israel was saved. Miracle of miracles. Nobody else but Nixon could have done it and did do it. Nobody else but Nixon could say, I don't care what your excuses are. I don't want to hear them. I want those rockets right there in Israel right now, saving the lives of our fellow people who believe in freedom. 48 hours later, the Israelis are winning the war. It's a tremendous milestone, probably the biggest turnaround there's ever been in a military event. Very, very quickly and beautifully executed by the Israelis and by the United States of America. Nobody but Nixon could have done it. Nobody but Nixon knew the government operations so well that he could just say, X, Y, and Z need to be done. If you don't do it, you're out of a job. Do it. And they did. And the next thing we knew, Mr. Sadat was ready to make peace. And they did make peace, and in fact became a reliable peace partner with Israel. That's why I called this book The Peacemaker. Nixon didn't do this because he was bribed. He didn't do this because he was paid some lavish compliment on the cover of People magazine. He did it because it was the right thing to do. I used to live right down the block from Bob Bartley, I'm sure many of you know, who was the editor of the Wall Street Journal. And I would ride on the subway with him from Brooklyn Heights to Lower Manhattan to the editorial offices of the Wall Street Journal. And he said, it's really simple. What kind of people are we? Are we the kind of people who help our friends? Are we the kind of people who let our friends get killed right in front of our eyes? Mr. Nixon said, you don't even need to answer the question, Ben. We know the answer. We believe in keeping democratic people alive. He did it. Nixon did it. It was life-saving. Look, the Jewish religion, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, we're 7,500 years old, roughly. Not exactly, not to the minute. But Elon Musk would say he could do it to the minute. I don't think we could. But anyway, we got life-saving gifts from the United States of America. It was a miracle, a genuine, authentic miracle. The loaves and the fishes, even more than that. It was a gift from God that never has been seen before or since. Thank you, God, for Mr. Nixon. Thank you, God, for Mr. Nixon, the peacemaker who saved the children of Israel for 7,500 years. What can we possibly do to thank Mr. Nixon for what he has done for us as Jews and as people who love peace and freedom? Wow, we're grateful to you, Mr. Nixon. We're grateful to be in this room. We're grateful to be in this library. We are grateful that someone like Mr. Nixon appeared on the scene. Wow, are we grateful. Now, okay, onward and upward. Now we see an act of butchery, horrible cruelty, sadistic, maniac cruelty done by yet another generation of maniac killers from some other hellhole in the Arab world. And this is now, again, the United States of America is there to help. Again, the haters, the killers, the anti-Semites, the murderers, basically the Nazis in a slightly different guise, are saying, oh no, it's the Jews' fault, it's the Jews' fault. It's always the Jews' fault. There's no such thing as it not being the Jews' fault. My wifey, not a Jew, but an incredibly wonderful person, a living, breathing goddess, saint. She knew the score. Her father, as I said, was in the military during World War II, and he was there fighting. He fought against the SS, and when this one particular battle near the end of the war was fought, and the Americans won and kicked the hell out of the Nazis, the head of the Nazi group said to someone in his unit, okay, we're now going to spit in your face, American pig. And he tried it, spat in Colonel Denman's face. That's my father-in-law's name. And my father-in-law could have killed him. His boss, a general, said, go ahead, I'm not going to report you. Go ahead and kill him. My father-in-law is such an incredible man, such an incredible Christian, such a great, great man that he did not kill him. He just said, you're a terribly sick person. I hope you get better. And let him go on to whatever prison camp, hellhole he should have gone to. That was the kind of family my wife came from. Okay. Now, my wife and I lie in bed night after night watching the killing, watching the sadism, watching the mania of vicious horribleness, horrible, night after night, and yet we tolerate it. We consider that these people are fellow humans beyond what we, again, could have imagined. Dear God, please, 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 let there be more people like Colonel Denman on this planet. That's my wife's surname. A person of stupendous greatness as a human being. Okay, we now have riots in the streets of America, even in our beloved Southern California, in which tens of thousands of haters and killers gather on the streets of Southern California, gather on the streets of Los Angeles, gather on the streets of my hometown, Washington, D.C., and scream for the death of Eretz Israel? No, I don't think so. It's a different Jew from today. It's not the Jew of when I was born on November 25th, 1944. It's a Jew who doesn't want to be killed. It's a Jew who's going to have a gun. He's going to be strapped himself or herself. They're not going to put up with it. We're not going to put up with this nonsense anymore at all, period. It's a different world, and it's a different Jew. Now, onward and upward again. We're not going to be pushed around this time. We're not going to be pushed around like we were before. Not like we did before. Never again, and the people who say it nowadays mean it. We're not going to see it anymore. Dear God, please don't let that happen. Where else do you have consulates in California, sir? Where else do you have consulates in Southern California, sir? Well, just California? No, you must have others. I'll let you think about it for a while. You know, we know how you slow-witted you Jews are. Anyway, let's onward and upward. This cannot be happening. We cannot have an America where the Jews can get spat on and treated like dirt, and the people who do it to them get away with it. We're seeing it happening right now. The New York Times, biggest bunch of liars in the history of journalism. I get it delivered to my front door. Delivered to my front door every day. My goddess wifey is sitting there as the paper is brought into our house, and I take it, bring it inside, and goddess wifey is fairly fast asleep, and she's strapped too. But you know what? We're never going to stop being strapped. Those days are over. We are going to stand up for ourselves. I hope if we don't, we deserve what we get. Please, God, don't let us be so stupid as to go around without being armed and strapped ourselves. And strapped is a word in street parlance, which just means you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, and that's what we're going to do. Now, onward and upward, we go forward with my son has a very excellent, superb, not just good, superb armory of guns, weapons of all kinds. It's not going to happen again, as they're going to come down the street with swastikas and not have anybody be ready for them. That's not going to happen again. At least I hope not. I'll be dead of it by that time that happens. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nixon would not have allowed that to happen. Mr. Nixon did not see the Jew as a perpetual victim. Look, here's what happened at the beginning of last month. The most brutal, horrible, vicious, sick attack on Jews since the Third Reich took place all over the world, but especially in Eretz Israel. And we didn't do anything, we as individual Jews didn't do anything bad back to them. That was a terrible mistake, horrible, horrible mistake. It's not going to happen again, I hope and pray. My wife doesn't want to have guns around, except in the drawer right next to our bed. There, but we're going to stand up for Eretz Israel, and we're going to stand up for Eretz Israel from now on. That's it. Second Amendment is not a joke to us. Second Amendment means first, last, always, we stand up for ourselves. I'll tell you where the nearest gun stores are if you want to ask me after my speech. Let's do it. Let's get those guns going. The people who wrote the Constitution weren't kidding. The Second Amendment meant something. We all mean something. But meanwhile, as I was saying, this astonishing truth, the worst vicious meanness took place against the Jews, most sickening meanness and cruelty in Israel, and most of us Jews did nothing about it, just absolutely zero. No, not anymore. Thank you anyway. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate your wanting us to get killed, but we think we'll let somebody else get killed next time. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nixon knew what that meant. When the communists bombed, terrorized any kind of place they could think of in the so-called Tet uprising. Mr. Nixon did not say, "Oh, we'll give them humanitarian aid." No, 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 no. He said, "I don't think so. Not this time. We're going to bomb the hell out of you." And he did, and it worked incredibly well. So that's Mr. Nixon's idea of how the world should be run. Mr. Churchill, in middle of 1940, people said to him, "Oh my gosh, the Germans are bombing you, and you want to bomb them back. What's the matter with you?" And Churchill and his bomber command, Bomber Harris, said, "Yeah, we're going to start bombing them back again." And people said to Mr. Churchill, "Surely you do not mean to imply that a super cosmopolitan country like England is going to bomb back our wonderful people in England. We're not going to let these people be called murderers just because they try to bomb back the people who bombed them. We're going to go forward and protect ourselves." It worked very, very well. Pretty soon, the Nazis realized that they couldn't do it and get away with it. And within a few years, the streets of all the big German cities were rubble. And that continued for a good long while, which is just how long it should have continued. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nixon understood all this. Mr. Nixon understood the world is not run as a charity case. The world is run to protect people who need protecting. It's run to protect people whose lives are on the line all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, we look around and we see the most horrible examples of the human spirit: bombing, killing. No, we don't think we'll have that anymore for a while. We think we'll have Jews standing up for themselves. We're going to see people stand up for their parents, for their children, for their families, for their neighborhoods. We're not going to get killed just for the heck of it, just because somebody sees a sign on somebody saying Jew. That doesn't mean you can automatically kill him. Thank you, Mr. Nixon, for understanding that lesson. Thank you all of you in this room for appreciating a president who understood that. Mr. Nixon saw the communists during the Tet Offensive killing everyone they could get their hands on. And Mr. Nixon said, "We don't work that way anymore. That's not the way America works. That's not the way free people work. We're going to give it back to whoever gives it to us." Mr. Churchill had said, "If you do it to us, we're going to do it back to you, and right away, too, right away in a big, big way." England is a very excellent maker of firearms and explosives. We're going to make firearms and explosives that will astonish even the Germans. Thank you, dear God. Thank you, dear God. We now have people in the armed forces of Great Britain. We have people in the armed forces of the United States who are going to give it back to the Japanese, going to give it back to the Germans. We're going to give it back to anybody who gives it to us. We're not going to get kicked around anymore. That's not the way the world works for us free people. Mr. Churchill understood it. It was a very basic thing to understand, and it worked very, very well. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nixon saved Israel. Mr. Nixon saw that Israel was on the verge of being annihilated by the Arabs and the Russians working together, and the Russians are nobody's idea of a bargain. And thank God, Mr. Churchill understood that very, very well. Mr. Eisenhower, Julie's husband's grandfather, he understood that very well. Too many people nowadays understand it. For the people who do the bombing and the killing to get away with it, it's not going to happen anymore. De Gaulle understood it when he was dealing with the French in Algeria and in North Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, strength. We stay free by being strong. That's what Mr. Churchill understood. That's what General Eisenhower understood. Let's understand it now, and let's not let ourselves get pushed around. Let's not let Israel get pushed around. My God, there are 50,000, 100,000 people demonstrating in the streets of New York saying, "Sure, come kill us." I don't think so. Let somebody else get killed this time. We'd like to have an America and an Israel and a state of Jews that stands up for themselves. No more Mr. Nice Guy, and no more letting ourselves get killed just because people like to kill Jews. I don't like them killing Jews. None of us in this room likes people killing Jews just for the heck of it. We want Jews to be free. We want Jews to be strong. We want a different kind of Jew in America. We want, as Mr. Begin said, the fighting Jew. And I think that's what we got under Mr. Begin, a number of other Israeli prime ministers. Let's have that back again. There's no reason not to have it back again. There's no reason Jews can't defend themselves. Whose idea was that? It's not a good idea. It's their idea it was. Ladies and gentlemen, we want an America that stands up straight and tall. We're going to get it. We're going to get it right now, and we're not going to back down again ever. Mr. Nixon understood this. Mr. Nixon understood peace through strength. Mr. Nixon understood that if you don't want to get killed, you arm yourselves thoroughly, and you don't let yourselves get killed. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember the lessons of Mr. Nixon. Strength. Mr. Nixon was subverted, hounded, his career wrecked by subversives in America and in the media. Forget about it. It's not happening anymore. That's an old world. The new world is strength. We don't get pushed around anymore. We believe in taking care of ourselves. And ladies and gentlemen, God bless the man whose spirit still suffuses this wonderful, wonderful building. God bless the wonderful, wonderful people in this building who stood up for America over and over and over again. We want people who believe in strength. If you can't play the game, go outside and play something else. Anyway, play jacks. Anyway, God bless you, everybody. And